So for everyone who just joined, welcome to these PractiTest webinar sessions. We're going to be talking today about master test plans. My name is Joel, and I'm Practice Chief Solution Architect, and I want to thank you for taking the time for joining this session, and also thanks for PractiTest for hosting us here. Now, before we even get started, I just want to basically review what do we want to talk about today. And again, in the next about 45 minutes, we're going to start by trying to be on the same page. What do I mean by a master test plan, or what does the industry mean by having here a master test plan? Then one of the questions that we're getting very, very heavily lately, and that is, wait a second, we're currently on an age where a lot of our companies are swifting into Agile. Is a master test plan still relevant when we're talking Agile? Is something that we shouldn't be doing? So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. Then we want to make these webinars very down to earth with a lot of tools that you can start working with. So I'm going to be talking about, at least from my personal perspective, what are the common parts and the most interesting parts of an MTP, of master test plan, and also where do you get that information in order to create a good master test plan. And as always, the last 20 minutes or so are going to be for you guys to go ahead and ask any questions about the theme here. And again, I think that this is what makes these sessions unique, the part that you guys actually get to ask, and it enriches the sessions quite a lot by getting all your feedback and talking about that. But before we go into that, just so that you know why am I here, so a little bit about me. First of all, I'm a tester. I've been doing testing for, again, it's 18 years, close to 19, last time I checked. And I've done most of the jobs that you can do as a tester. I started by doing testing, obviously manual testing. I also have been a QA lead, QA manager, QA consultant, even though it's not in here. I've been doing consulting for quite a long time. I also have a blog, and you will be able to see it at the end of the session. It's the QA blog as part of the PractiTest site. And again, it's a place where I try to speak about the stuff that I think it's interesting to us testers. And I also speak on some conferences, local and international. And something that might not sound related, but as a QA manager and as a tester, I also serve as a solution architect. And this actually brings me to the company where I work, and that is PractiTest. And I will be talking about PractiTest, but within PractiTest, first of all, my job as a tester is to be the chief solution architect for our test and QA management tool. But I'm also the QA enthusiast in the system, and I'm also the QA manager. So all of the QA efforts are basically something that I lead, and so I try to keep very much up to date with what's going on in here. So I mentioned PractiTest, so just that we understand what are we talking about, and I'm sure that, again, many of you have heard of us, but for those of you who haven't, PractiTest, it's a SaaS ALM solution. SaaS as software as a service, and ALM as in application lifecycle management. So those are pretty nice words for a QA management system on the cloud. It's a system that, again, not only because I work here, that's the feedback that we get from people. It's very simple and intuitive, but it also gives you a lot of flexibility and methodology that you're looking for if you want to manage your testing process as you should do it. Question that we're asked all the time. We integrate quite a lot, and you can see, again, only some of the tools that we integrate with. And again, just try us, but I can tell you we have the best support in the business, and we make sure to help our users not only with the tools, but also with their methodologies. So when I say that I'm a QA enthusiast, then this is actually what we do here. Now, before we move, something I didn't mention, next to me is actually Noah, PractiTest marketing manager, and she's going to be helping us. So if you have any questions throughout the session, please go ahead and start asking them. We will review them at the end of the session. But even right now, I want to start, before we go into the session, I want to ask a question to the people in here. So Noah, if you can show the question that we have. And the question that I want to ask is, how many of you guys on the system actually have an MTP in your team, in your company? Okay, so the answers for those might be, yes, we do, and we love it and we like it. Yeah, but it's not that good of an MTP. Another answer might be, nope, we don't have it. And well, I'm not sure. It's always a nice answer to have. So I see that you're starting to answer here. Okay, about half of you already answered. We're going to give a couple more seconds for that. Cool, we're about 3/3. For those of you who haven't answered, you can go ahead and answer right now. We're going to be closing the poll shortly. Okay, I think we can close the poll. And let's share the results now. Let's see if we can share. Wait. Share the results in here. And as you can see, actually what we see is that about 20% of the people, yes, they have an MTP, something they're proud of, but we see that the vast majority are either people who don't have an MTP, and again, it's amazing that about 40% of people don't really have an MTP, and even more than half the people are not even sure if they have it. And still those who do actually think that it's something that should actually be improved. So again, good data to continue working. Let's actually move on and let's see how can we move to the next session. Wait a second. Okay, I need to show my screen once again. Technical difficulties that we usually get. And wait, now we need to show the right screen. And there we go. Okay, guys. So we saw that even though some of you might have MTP, some of you might have MTPs that you want to better, but the vast majority of people either don't have them or want to fix them. So let's start talking about that. And in order to make sure that we're all on the same page here, and it might amaze some of you, I want to start first of all by defining what's an MTP, what's a master test plan. And again, it's important to understand it's not about the definition. It's not about the words. It's not about the MTT or the P. Some people will call it software test plans, testing strategy or testing strategy document. And if you go to the ISTQB, you will have all sorts of definitions. But the interesting thing is that most people think that your master test plan is basically a document. Okay, and you know what? It is. It's something that it's written down. But in my eyes and in my mind, more important than the document itself is actually a process, okay? And you should actually approach the creation of your master test plan as the process by which you're actually sitting down with your team, internal and external to your company. You're analyzing the project, you're analyzing the business requirements of what you want to do, the systems that you're going to be testing. And basically, before you start going full force forward, understand what do you want to do and what does forward means and where does the force actually need to go into it. Now, the problem with these types of definitions is that it's very wide and it's very hard to understand what we mean by this. And one of the things that I developed in the last couple of years is the following exercise that helps me to teach people what do you mean and what you should be actually aiming at when you want to sit down and create your MTP. So I want to do an exercise with everyone on the team, and again, feel free to share it with your team later on. Let's assume for a second that you are in charge of the QA and the testing in your company. This might be the case, or it might not be the case, and you might only be a tester, but for a second, let's assume that you're the QA manager and you're in charge of all the testing. Up to now, your company has done all of your testing in-house. Okay, so every tester has been in your company, all the testing process have been in-house, and so it's very easy for you maybe to do it. But for a second, let's assume that your CEO just came to you and he said, hey, you know what, Joe? From now on, all of the testing is going to be outsourced, but you're still going to be the responsible person for that. So you need to go ahead and define it, you need to go ahead and manage it, but it's going to be done by people who are not in the company anymore. Now, if this is the case, then try to think about the type of document and the type of process that you would overgo in order to define what does these people need to do. And here is where you will get your MTP. Okay, your master test plan should be that document or that process that will come and scope the work of your team. Should say, hey, this is what we're going to be doing. These are going to be my responsibilities of the team. Again, let's go back into your internal team. You're talking about a team in your company, but what are your responsibilities? And when you define your responsibilities, you're actually saying what are the responsibilities of the other teams in the company. You're going to be talking about the process, how are you going to be doing things and getting that feedback. And you're also going to be listing all of your risk and all the assumptions that will help you either to make or to miss that job that you're doing. So What I try to do whenever I sit with customers and with friends in order to work on MTPs is say, imagine that you're an external company and you're going to get paid for this project. How do you want to come and say, hey, this is what we agreed to do and this is what we didn't agree to do? And as you will see when we talk about the different parts, it's not so much because you want to make sure that, again, people won't come and tell you later on that you missed something, but because you want to get the feedback for people in order to plan correctly. Okay? Now, I don't want to leave this conversation on a high level and theoretical basis. So what I want to do right now, I want to share with you how does my personal MTP looks like. Okay? So just to share with you my MTP's table of contents, this is how it usually looks like. But again, before I even go over it, understand that my MTP changes constantly. This is how the table of contents looks today. It's different from how it looked about 6 months ago, and I'm sure that it's different from how it's going to look in a year from now. But this is the stuff that I want to have on my MTP, and I'm not going to go very in detail right now. We have time for that, and I will go, believe me, step by step on each one of these places. But what I usually have are my objectives, the scope of what I'm going to be testing. Very important for me to tell people, hey, this is my matrix of operating systems, browsers, devices. This is what I'm going to be doing. I'm usually the risk manager in my company, so it takes us back to the last webinar we had about risk management, so I'm going to be talking about that. And again, all sorts of stuff about preparations and calendars, and even my contact information is going to be in there. But as I said, I don't want to go very deep on the points because I'm going to be touching them one by one and explaining them very deeply in about 5 minutes. Now, I do want to remind you, if you have any questions about the stuff that we're talking about, you should not wait until the end. Go ahead and ask them. Noah is going to be more moderating these questions. And in about 15 minutes, we're going to be going over them. Now, I want to make a pause right now on my MTP and how do you create your MTP. And I want to go ahead and proactively answer a question that is being asked, I'm sure, by many of you right now. And the question that I'm asked constantly is, hey, Joel, we're working on an Agile project. We're going into Scrum. Up to now, I used to make MTPs or I didn't. But what am I supposed to do right now? I mean, I see that everyone's saying, hey, on Scrum and on Agile, we don't really need to work so hard and we don't plan that much. We don't obviously document, so you shouldn't have waste so much time on MTP, stuff like that. And guys, the answer is completely different than that. And before we go into that, let's try to understand why people mistakenly tend to think that MTPs and Agile don't mix up so well. There are a couple of mistakes that people tend to make around Agile. The first mistake is to assume that Agile is against planning. Okay, some people say, hey, on Agile, there's no planning. You have a backlog and you just take the first user story, work on it, second user story, work on it. That's as wrong as you can be when you talk about Agile. Agile has as much planning as any other type of projects. Okay, maybe you're going to be doing on smaller intervals. Maybe you're going to be doing on smaller chunks and you're going to be reviewing it all the time. But even if we look at the average Scrum project, you will start by having release planning that goes over every 3 to 4 months. Then obviously you will have sprint planning for 2 to 4 weeks, and you will have daily stand-ups if you want. So there's going to be a lot of planning, but it's going to be a lot more flexible than that. Okay, so that's the first part. The second mistake that people tend to have is to think that Agile is against documentation. And again, this is completely untrue. If you go over the Agile manifesto and you try to understand what's Agile against, Agile it's against documentation for the sake of documentation. Okay, so if you remember all those times where we needed to write very big documents that we knew for a fact at the beginning that no one wanted to have, then these are the documents we don't want to have. Agile is also against documentation instead of communication, okay? We want to make sure that you don't take the documents and say, hey, I don't need to talk to my developers, I already wrote a document for that. Okay, it's not the idea of your Agile documentation. So if you understand that Agile is not against planning and Agile is not against documentation, then you understand that actually MTPs and Agile projects do mix together. You only need to take into account some of the following points, okay? And again, these are only a couple of them, but take into account there are obviously more, but I just want to mention the ones that I think are more important. Maybe the most important part about the MTP is not the document that you're going to be having at the end of it, but it's the 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't get it. I don't care, 2 days might be. That planning process where you and your team sat down and reviewed what do you want to do, what's your scope, what are your constraints, what computers do you need. That's the most important thing. And that actually matches with Agile very well, even though it's usually neglected. People go into Agile, and again, go into it blindly, almost, and it becomes very problematic afterwards. Now, as I said, Agile is not against documentation, it's against fat documentation. So go ahead and make documentation lean. 2 tips that I have. The first one, try to use PowerPoint. If you limit yourself to PowerPoint instead of Word, your documents are going to be leaner. They're going to be more to the point, and you won't have so much room in order to chit-chat so much. Another option, and this one I like even more, take a flip chart, take the pages of the flip chart, use them in order to document as you go along your MTP, and then post those pages on the wall of your common area, of your cubicle in your office, whatever you want. And so your MTP is going to be a document that everyone actually is going to be reading and going over all the time. Okay, so again, a couple of ideas. By the way, you can also do this if you're working in a non-agile environment. It's pretty cool. Specifically for agile teams and for testing teams that go into agile during the first couple of sprints, you need to make sure to translate your testing task into user stories for your backlog. Sometimes, again, we tend to think that the backlog should have only functional user stories, but you need to have testing user stories, meaning if you're going to be needing to test multiple environments, it needs to appear there. If you need to be testing load, it needs to appear there as user stories. So include your user stories, include also preparation tasks. If you need to train someone, if you need to, again, acquire machines, make sure that everything actually is there, because if not, it's not going to be done. If we're talking about the regular quote-unquote user stories, the functional user stories, a big mistake, and again, mostly for teams starting, is that they think that they need to estimate only the time it takes to write the user story, maybe to make the unit testing, but you need to have there also your testing estimates. Okay, if you don't have testing in there, then you're going to run into problems because you won't have time to test. And this takes us to our last point for MTPs and Agile projects. There's something called the definition of done. And if you haven't worked on a Scrum or an Agile process, then it might be hard to understand, but in a nutshell, it says, if you have a user story, when can you say that you're done with it? And it's called the definition of done, and it usually says, hey, you need to have so-and-so parts of the user story done, and so-and-so, again, verifications from someone. Make sure that as part of that definition of done, you have proper testing in there, and proper testing is defined as not the best case scenario running. And again, this is all parts that, in my mind at least, should go into what should be done for Agile projects during the MTP process. Okay, and again, this is only like, I don't know, very quick advice. And obviously, we could have a complete session about MTPs and Agile, but I want to drop it as is. And again, if you have questions about that, we can talk about it either as part of the session or offline later on. Now, leaving Agile on the side, in order to fulfill my promise, I said that I would talk about my MTP and what do I have in my personal MTP here. And again, as I said, this is very personal. It's based on my reality in the company where I'm working right now, with the customers that I'm working right now. It might have some stuff that you want to take with you, but take into account that your will look a little bit different. I'm sure about that. So my first section on the MTP, it's always what I called my testing objectives, okay? To try to define it, I always try to look at the business objective of the project that I'm working on, and I want to make sure that my testing objectives are aligned with that. Obviously, it's going to be related to the features that we're going to be testing, but it might also be linked to something that's less businessy, but it might be the stuff that hurt us lately. Okay, so if we had some bugs and stuff that we need to correct for this version, even though it's not part of the business, I will want it to appear here. Now, a mistake that a lot of people do, please do not write trivial stuff. If you start by writing stuff like, hey, my objective with my master test plan is to find all the bugs in the system, or if you're going to be releasing a high quality product, this is stuff that it's trivial. It's like, really? Is this what you're writing the document for? Save us the time. If people read this at the beginning, they will lose interest. Leave it at that and move on. Okay, people don't have time to waste. So what should we have in there? You know what? I actually went back and brought some examples. Some of them are from my MTPs in the past. Some of them are from MTPs from customers that I've been working with. And you see stuff that it's a lot more down to earth. Stuff like in this master test plan or this testing project, we're going to be focusing on the performance issues. And this usually when you used to have performance issues in the past and you want to make sure that you're correcting them. Or again, think about you're releasing a new mobile client. So you want to have something of, yeah, we're going to put a lot of emphasis on making sure that the new mobile client works okay, both by itself, but also within the existing product. Or again, only another example so that you understand the different contrast that you can have might be, okay, so we're doing a very big GUI redo, so we're going to make sure that it's correctly displaying all devices and versions. Maybe we had some problems in the past. So you want to focus on the stuff that people will say, yes, we're on the right track. And if they don't see the stuff that they want you to focus, you want them to ask questions, okay? I didn't mention this before, but the whole idea of writing a document and sharing it with people is going to be to make sure that they can give you feedback and make sure that you're on the right track, both in your eyes, but also on their eyes as well. Now, this takes me to the second part. And many times this is the most important part or the most commented part on my MTPs, and this is what I call the testing scope. What am I going to test? Okay, strictly speaking, this is the stuff that I'm going to be testing. And for this, I like to work on nested lists, even though, again, people might do it differently. But for me, a nested list starts from a product, then a component, then a module, maybe functional area, and you make like a nest that you go into that. And when you reach a level of functionality that you're going to be working on, then you actually put here the main points that you want to test. Okay, so if you have new features, these might be the new features that you want to have in the year. This is what I'm going to be testing here. You're going to be putting there the stuff that you're going to be focusing on. If you have any requirements for testing or any assumptions, I'm going to be needing real user data for that, or I'm going to be needing, again, very large files for that. I'm going to put it in here. The most important part, and again, the part I mean most important because I get a lot of feedback, how long are you going to be testing that? Okay, it's amazing. Sometimes you put here, hey, I'm going to be using here 3 man days, versus in another feature, you're going to be putting 15 man days in here. People start asking questions. Why are you going to be testing so much here? Why are you going to be testing so little here? Again, it's going to draw a lot of fire, and it's good you want to get that fire so that you get that feedback. When do you plan to start? That information is very important to make sure that development will give you the features on time. When do you plan to end? Okay, again, development will say, hey, if you find the bug towards the end, will I have enough time to fix it? Okay, so stuff's going to be there. And again, any other thing that might be of interest. And this is where you actually need to go ahead and fill the blank. And as I said, if you write this section correctly, here is where you will get most of the feedback, at least from your development. Okay, development, product management, this is the place where they're going to be focusing and saying, hey, you're doing here too little, you're doing here too much, you forgot about this. It's going to be very, very nice. Now, moving forwards, and again, something that is very important, especially nowadays, is your testing configuration metrics. Okay, we're talking here about projects that are going to be working in different, again, devices, operating systems, browsers. Maybe you're talking about something that should have external integrations with many tools. If we're talking about Salesforce and other systems out there. Sometimes we're talking about embedded systems. So you have different hardware, software configurations that you need to be testing. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Write all the stuff that is going to be important for you. Now, what I like to do with my testing configuration matrix is, first of all, I want to mention on what configurations will I'll be doing the functional testing cycles or the functional tests. And remember, by this I mean those tests that are not intended to go only on the support tests, but what am I going to be testing day to day? And usually you want to have here those configurations that are more problematic and maybe those that your development are not using to develop. Okay, so you want to list that in there and why. And you also want to go ahead and create your testing metrics. Okay, what are you going to be testing? How are you going to be doing it? And here you want to have, again, maybe a 2-dimension matrix, 3-dimension matrix, whatever you want to have in there, and be very specific. Say, hey, on this combination, I'm going to be doing a full regression. On this one, I'm going to be doing a sanity test. This one, I'm not going to be touching it because I assume that this and this. Okay, so go ahead and bring that up forward so that people can bring you feedback and say, you forgot that JavaScript functions differently here and here. It's going to be very interesting. Okay. Now I know that I need to move forward quickly, so I'm going to move to the next section. And again, if you were on our latest or on our last webinar, you know that it's something that I care about very much, and that is risk management. In a nutshell, I believe that the QA function in the team should be responsible for risk management. Okay, so we have 2 types of risks. We have product risks, and these are risks of having important bugs, and we have project risks, and those are risks of having delays or budget slips. Okay, so one of them is bugs, the other one is the project not meeting our deadlines. So I believe that when we have our master test plan, we should also create what we call a risk list. Okay, and that means that at this point we know that these are the most important risks. Put a name, short description. I talked quite intensively about risk level, so go ahead and fetch the last webinar and understand that, again, risk level is likelihood times consequence, more or less. And that gives you a rating of your risks, who's the owner, and again, relevant timelines for those risks. And as I mentioned before, if you're going to be if we're going to be the risk manager, then you will be creating here your first risk list and continue working about that. And what Noah was telling me was that if someone wants to get access to our webinar on risk management, just let us know and we'll send you those links so that you can go over that as well. Moving forwards, and remember, we're trying to document stuff that we want to get feedback from people. Okay, so let's go over hardware and software required. And I have a personal story here. I remember I was working, again, it's a company way before PractiTest. We were doing systems that were to be installed on the customer side. And we started to release a version of the product that was supposed to run on these very big IBM machines. And we remember that we needed to test that. And the development actually worked on an emulator of that. And when the time came to test, then we said, hey, where's our machine in order to test? And the guys in development says, didn't you order it before? We're like, we didn't. We thought that you were going to bring it here. And all of a sudden, we realized that no one had ordered that machine. And we obviously needed to test on that. So we went and ordered it, but we had like a delivery time of about 8 weeks. And even though the project was a year long, 2 months of waiting was a lot of time. And again, we delayed the release, not only for that, but for a lot of other reasons. And it's very important to think about the hardware and the software that you will be needing. Think about also, sometimes you can do parallel use. And so again, have less machines, but sometimes you can't, okay? So think about all the environments listed here, make sure that people have buy-in on that, and then you can go and purchase them, because we're talking here about money. Now, if we're talking about preparations, then there's also testing preparations, okay? Think about, you have a set of test cases, what other tests do you need to write? Okay, sometimes you need to hire new people. You're going to be working on systems that you haven't worked on. Maybe your company is going to be outsourcing or crowdsourcing. Even if you're going to be outsourcing or crowdsourcing, there's a big lead time for that. Okay, so plan ahead, make sure that you have everyone in-house. You selected your crowdsourcer. Again, do all that up front so that you're not going to be running late. Once you have all of this stuff in here, then we can actually go and move forward and start talking about schedules. Okay, I know that this might mean more waterfall-like projects, but still important. Try to think about your project, and again, divide it into cycles and phases. You might have a preparation phase, 2 to 3 new feature cycles, 1 to 2 regression cycles, 1 final cycle for staging. Again, you know your project, you know your product, you know how many cycles you will need for that. But again, divide your project into each of those cycles, and for each of those cycles, define, okay, which are my timelines, what's my entry criteria, what's my exit criteria. Make sure that everyone understands that, because when you're going to be delaying your exit criteria because something of the development or your entry criteria, you want to have their buy-in so that, again, they won't come saying, hey, you told me this and you're not delivering that. Everyone should be in there. Testing scope, what features you're going to be working on every one of your stages. Make sure that your development is going to be delivering what you need. Don't have any surprises there. And obviously your testing resources in there. Now, once you have that schedule, it doesn't end in there. You need to go ahead and translate that schedule on a high level to what I call a calendar and resource allocation schedule. And again, it's very funny, but I love it when in many projects people forget, quote unquote, about holidays or summer vacations. For example, right now in Israel where we are, we're on the kids have summer vacations, so people are basically working 60%. And if you plan that people are going to be working 100%, then you're going to be running late. And if you have end of year holidays or any other type of holidays, and every country is going to be different, then you need actually to plan for that. Make sure that your calendar will have all of those quote unquote anomalies. Again, people miss them. They think that you have 5 days a week and you have 4 weeks a month, and that's as much planning as people do. Translate it. Make sure that you have it there. And then you will be able to say, hey, I know that even though I have 15 people in my team, not all the 15 are going to be committed to the whole project all the time. These are the resources that are going to be allocated to my project on between this date and that date. And if someone will leave the team, I know that I will need to replace him or her. Allocate time for training. Make sure that, again, you translate everything to a calendar, because regular days do not translate to calendar days very well. Okay, and again, remember, guys, you're testing. You're always the last phase before release. You're always going to be delaying the release, so you want to make sure to have these numbers very, very straight. Now, the last 2 points that I tend to have on my master test plan are, first of all, references. I like to have links to documents that I use, internal documents, stuff like that, just to make sure that people can go ahead and read more. It might be a formalistic, but I like to have them. And you'd be surprised, but you need to add there your contact information. Why? Because you wrote a document, the document was sent to X, Y, and Z person, but these guys actually forwarded and forwarded and forwarded. And it has happened to me that all of a sudden someone I didn't even know from my company said, "Hey, Joel, I was reading this and this and this, and I was wondering about that." And again, you want them to go and ask the questions. You want them to comment on your MTPs, because this is where you're going to be getting all of that feedback. And so you want to make sure that people don't need to wonder ahead who wrote this and how to reach you. So put your email, put your phone number, make sure that people within your company know how to reach you when you're talking about your MTPs. Okay. So again, in summary, this is my MTP. And as I said, it will change. I'm sure that it will continue changing as I get other ideas, other epiphanies of how I should be working. And you should also take this information, again, adapt it to the way that you want to work. Now, another thing that I wanted to make sure to mention here, and it was not part of the presentation, but it's not less important. Your MTP let's forget about it as a document. Let's talk about it as a process. It's something that should be constantly reviewed, okay? The objectives of your project will shift. The scope of your testing will shift. The matrices that you're going to be testing will shift. And you need to understand that that will have an effect on your calendar and your schedules. Your MTP, your planning needs to be very flexible. And I think that those of you who are working Agile understand that this is the reason for Agile. Things change and you need to adapt. But those of us who not always work Agile, but work more on a waterfall level, tend to forget about it. So don't create your MTP and file it on your drawer. Review it every month, review it whenever you start a new phase to make sure that those assumptions and those plans still hold their truth, okay? And you don't need to change them and to review additional stuff with other people, okay? Now, what I want to do right now, and with the help of Noah, who has been monitoring the questions, is actually to turn to you guys. And as I said before, the whole idea of this section, these sessions, is to make it as interactive as we can. So we're going to start by the questions that people have been asking, but I do want to go ahead and say, hey guys, if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. They make these sessions better. There are no dumb questions for me. So even if we don't go over all the questions that we have in here, we'll get back to you if needed be. So just a second, I'm going to turn to Noah and see the questions that we have gotten up to now. Okay, so I have here a question. Let me go ahead and read it. And again, I'm going to read what I have in here. Someone actually wrote, our situation is the following. We're actually working on agile development, focus on development of features and testing on the fly. Even though we have a tester plus automation expert, the QA is actually not involved in the planning, and testing tasks are always delegated when someone sees or remembers that we should be in there. What would be a good idea to do or run tests regularly here? So the person who's asking this, I think that the main problem that you have right now is about the value that your organization currently has on testing. Okay, and you wrote it, meaning people are going into testing whenever someone remembers or sees that there's a task that needs to be tested. And I think that, again, you may start thinking about how do you plan stuff, but if you're working Agile here, I would start by saying, hey guys, we need to talk here about the definition of done. And this might be your most important part of your NTP. When you're planning a feature where you have a user story, when you're writing down a user story, you should also consider testing. You should have the testers being part of that session, okay? And make sure that you understand what needs to be tested, what needs to be done. So it's going to be like a micro MTP that you're going to be doing in there, but at least you will be doing some test planning and you will have some references to the test cases that you have in there. By the way, I think that automation is besides the point. Automation is something that it's more of long range or long run effort that you're going to be doing. But if you're going to be talking about manual testing, I think that even if you're working agile, people that understand agile correctly understand that testing it's a very, very important part of agile development. But you need to have good testers or good test architects in this place that will tell you, hey, these are the steps, these are the things. Oops, sorry. Window just run. These are the things that need to be considered as part of your feature. And so these are the test cases that we want to go ahead and define. So it might be a micro MTP, but think about test planning whenever you think about a feature, even if you're working on an agile process. Okay, and again, these are part of the things that really bother me when people tend to say, hey, I'm working agile, or a company that tends to say, I'm working agile, but they miss the idea of agile completely. Okay, agile is not about development quick and dirty. It's about delivering quickly, but delivering quickly because you actually have a good process that will help you to deliver good products, okay, quickly. We're going over to the next question here. There's a question here, within the MTP, where do you describe the testing approach? And I guess that by testing approach, we mean how are you going to be testing that? And if I go, again, let's go over to our MTP document. Let me just navigate there. I would talk about our testing approach. I would actually add it on my testing scope. Okay, maybe I didn't explain it correctly, but when I talk about my main points to test, it's not only what am I going to be testing, but how am I going to be testing. Okay, if I'm going to be doing here scripted testing here, plus cycles of exploratory testing, plus I'm going to be sending these features in order to be validated on the field, then I'm going to be putting here what am I going to be doing here. Okay, so it's not only about the what we're going to be testing that is going to be written on my testing scope, it's also going to be about the how am I going to be testing here. Okay, so actually a great point. You want to share that with people so that they understand. If you're going to go crazy and start again doing, I don't know, a bug hunt for something that you think requires a bug hunt, make sure that you write it on when you're going to be having it there. And also when we talk about, let me just check for the other place, when we're talking about the schedules for my master test plan, again, within your different phases, also try to put here, if you're going to be having, again, testing projects that will require external people, like alpha testing, you want to bring some people to actually work in-house, or you're going to be doing bug hunts and maybe involving part of your customers, then go ahead and add it in here. Okay. Okay. Next question here. How can we align this type of test plan in Agile when the sprint is about 4 weeks of duration? I want to go back into Agile. It might be the case that your sprint is 4 weeks, but it's seldom the case that the project is 4 weeks, okay? And again, I'm looking for the right slide here, and I want to come here, and I want to focus on this area that we have here, okay? Even if you're working Agile, even on companies that are working not only on continuous, again, on sprints, but even if you're doing continuous delivery, there's always going to be planning on the release level. Someone will come and say, hey, for the next 3-4 months, these are the big rocks that we're going to be focusing on. Okay, then you're going to be translating that in your case to the question that someone was saying on our 4-week sprints. Okay, but still there are plans, there are user stories, there are objectives that you want to do as part of your project. Okay, so I guess that my MTP would come whenever your company is doing release planning. And if you're not aware of the release planning that you're doing, then you're missing something out here, because I'm sure that your product owners are sitting together and saying, this is what we want to do. And I'm sure that they're sitting with your technical architects to say, how should we do it? Even if you have, again, sprints of 4 weeks. So start by mapping your master test plans to your release planning. Okay, an MTP doesn't need to be for a project that takes 12 months. It can be for a project that takes a month. It can be for a project that takes 3 months. But try to map it there. Okay, many times the problem is that us as testers are not really aware of the strategic planning that is taking place in our company. And so you can actually go ahead and link your MTP to your strategic planning. If you don't have a choice, then at least if you have 4-week sprints, these are very large sprints, you can try to have a mini MTP related to your sprint planning if you have. Okay, question here. Do you have an example, a visual example of how the testing matrix looks like? I actually was thinking about it if I should actually put it there. My problem is that your testing matrix will look very different. Look on the internet, and if you don't find it, send me an email. You'll have my email address in there. But basically, when we look into a testing matrix, what we will have is, let's say that you're doing a mobile device versus platform that you have in there. So you might say, hey, I'm going to be having here the mobile devices that I'm going to be having. If you're a web-based mobile system, then you're going to be having here the different browsers per mobile device. And each one of your squares here, it's actually the crossing of those. You should be adding here, okay, so this I'm going to be doing full regression, this I'm going to be doing on sanity, this I'm not going to be doing. And again, it's like a color-coded table that you have in here. The most basic example, and we used to do it quite a lot when we have operating systems and browsers, then you do like Windows, Mac, Linux, and you add here all of your IEs that are supported and which ones you're going to be doing in full regression and which ones not. And Firefoxes and well, obviously Chrome, it's usually one version. But you have there, and the most important things in there are going to be, okay, so this I'm going to be doing full regression, and it's usually, I don't know, 15, 20% of all the squares in here. And then about 50% of the squares are going to be on sanity. And you will have a lot of squares that are empty. And they will be empty because you have assumptions that if there's a bug, you will be finding them in some of your other places. So again, for this person, if you're having problems finding that matrix, let me know. I'll send you a couple of examples. Okay. Someone who wants to get access here, they said that the information is great. And again, we will be sharing. I'm not sure that I will be able to share my MTP, but again, you will have here the slides and you will have the MTP in there. And if you want me to review your MTP, just send it to me, and I will be happy to share it with people who want to get my feedback on that. Okay, it might be easier than that. Okay, going over to my MTP document. So there's a person here asking, how is section 3, the testing matrix, and the software and hardware requirements different? Well, they're not. Actually, they're not that different. The difference in here is that you're actually creating these sections for different audience. You're creating the testing matrix, as I said. You're going to be showing people what are you going to be testing in order to get their feedback. Maybe you need to test more, maybe you can test less in there. But once you know what you need to test based on your testing matrix, translate that on the software and hardware you actually need to go ahead and buy. Again, I'm saying here, you need to acquire that hardware, you need to acquire that software. If you're working on mobile devices, it's not that trivial to get the 50 plus devices that you want to do. If you're going to be working in different international carriers, it's even harder, okay? So in this case, you're going to be working with someone like Perfecto Mobile or one of the other providers, but make sure that your project team understands there's going to be a cost, there needs to be an allocation of that. And if you look into it, the input for your software and hardware requirements come from your testing matrix. But if you send your testing matrix to your manager and say, hey, can you approve me to buy that stuff? He will look at you and say, what do you want me to buy? Please be more specific. And that's what you want to have in here. Okay. And again, part of the feedback that I have gotten from section 5 is, hey, you're asking for too much. And then you point them to the testing matrix and say, okay, what risk do you want me to take? And people say, you know what? I don't want any risk, so go ahead and buy what you have in there. Okay, but it's important to have it in two different sections because it will make your case stronger. We need to go ahead and, again, buy tens of thousands of dollars based on equipment. Under software hardware requirements also related to this, do you include licenses for testers of the SUT or just test tool licenses? I include anything that I need to buy. Okay, if I need to get, okay, so personal story, I used to work for Mercury Interactive back in the day, and I remember that the best thing that we have about Mercury Interactive was that we didn't need to care about virtual users for Load Runner. So if we had to work with 100 virtual users or 100,000 virtual users, we actually had the license generators. We could do however many virtual users we had to have. But when I went and I started working outside and we had to get virtual user licenses, I understood how hard it is to get it because they're so expensive. So whatever cost, anything that you need actually to get a sign off from someone, make sure that you have it in here under your software hardware requirements, software hardware licenses, whatever you have in here. Okay, another long question, so I'm going to go over it. As we're testing the different phases of the project, we may roll on different users to test different functionality. What's the most economical way to manage changing users? Okay, this is a question about practice. I just realized that. So again, for those users who are working with PractiTest, and just to give you a little bit of a background, we have different types of licenses in PractiTest. We have developer licenses that have access to bugs, and tester licenses that have access to the whole process. And again, if you want to learn more, just let me know. And what this person was doing is, how can we allocate? And we're going to be using different. We're going to be switching from tester license to developer licenses all the time. So when you're actually doing the calendar and resources, if you don't want to have, again, too many tester licenses for this quarter or something like that, you can actually play within your calendar allocation. Okay, try to see, okay, so on these 3 weeks, we're going to be having these guys working with tester licenses. Those 3 weeks are going to be other people working with tester licenses. That is on your calendar and resources. Having said that, and again, for those of you working with PractiTest, remember that with PractiTest, it doesn't really matter if you have a peak of users, because you can switch between the licenses on the fly, and we will charge you only for the average number of licenses based on the number. So if you have 6 testers and 9 developers, or in a shorter span you have 9 testers alone, it might be even more economic. So I wouldn't waste so much time on that. And if you want me to translate that into numbers, again, contact me and I'll be happy to go over that. Again, Noah, the gatekeeper, is telling me that this is my last question, so thanks, Noah. If there are more questions, again, we'll go over them maybe by email. How do I keep my MTP? Oh, okay, the question is, sorry. How do I keep my MTP intact or common when I have to test almost 5 applications per monthly release? Well, let's start by going over this. If you have 5 applications, then you're going to be having 5 MTPs, okay? And that means that you need to, and if you're having 5 application releases on a month, that means that your MTPs need to meet your needs. So remember, and again, I'm going to go over to this slide because I think that it's the most important slide in the whole pack here. The MTP, it's a document, yes. But more importantly, it's the process, guys. It's the process to analyze what you need to do. An MTP can be 1 page in Word that you put on the wall, and that's it. And if you need to have 5 MTPs a month, maybe that's the approach you want to go over it, and have a shorter MTP, a more focused MTP. But have a place where before you started testing, especially if you're going to be testing 5 applications on a month, it's going to be crazy. And you need to have that time that you save for yourself, and you say, hey, I'm not going to be doing anything right now. I'm not going to go into that whirlwind blindly. I'm going to plan ahead. This is what I'm going to test. This is what I'm not going to test. And these are the risks that I'm going to be taking. Have that MTP for each one of your 5 releases. And again, it doesn't need to be a 2-day planning. It can be a 1-hour planning with yourself, maybe with a colleague. But make sure that you actually take the time to do a smaller MTP, a leaner MTP, but still plan your testing for that process. Because again, if not, then you're going to work fast, but you're going to be working lousily because you're going to be releasing bugs and not testing whatever you had to do. Okay. So Noah tells me that we need to cut at this point. So guys, I do want to thank everyone for taking part of this webinar. We're going to be sharing this session with everyone who was here. So we share it proactively with everyone, or people need to contact us now? We will send them to you guys after the session is done. Again, thank you very much for your questions. Let me just complete it here. And again, for the protocol, wait, we were in this page here. So again, I talked a little bit about PractiTest, but if you want to learn more about PractiTest, get in touch with us. We'll be obviously more than happy to help. And guys, if you want to contact me, I'm the happiest person to get contacted by. So you have here my email address. This is my personal email. It doesn't go to anyone else. joel@practitest.com. Make sure to write to me. And again, if you want to read more about the stuff that I write, and again, more of the people on the team write, go to http://qablog.practitest.com. And again, we'll be more than happy to be in touch with you guys. And again, make sure to join us in our next webinar. It's going to be in about a month from now. and we're going to be publishing the topic shortly. So Joel from PractiTest here, thanking you for letting me be with you for this hour. And again, we'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye, and have a great day.